Are you ready to unleash your full potential and become unstoppable in your success and leadership?
Welcome to the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast, where we provide powerful insights and strategies for coaches, corporate leaders, and entrepreneurs. I'm Alexanne Carter.
And I'm Carol Register, and we're certified master neurocoaches who are passionate about helping you overcome your limiting beliefs and optimize your performance.
Each week, we'll be sharing actionable tips and strategies using neuroscience, from interviews with industry experts to solo episodes to help you lead a life of power, purpose, and possibility on your own terms.
Join our community of like-minded individuals. Hit subscribe now and let's be unleashed and unstoppable together.
Hey, leader. Welcome back to the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast. I am so excited to be joined with us today by a great friend of mine and who has been on the podcast previously, Brandee Safran. She is located in Montreal. She's a Canadian buddy like me. And one thing which is really cool about Brandee and something that has supported me in learning a lot more is about astrology, about the relationship that we have with where the stars and the moons and going so much deeper in, our productivity, our ability to focus, our ability to be connected with ourselves as a woman and be unleashed and unstoppable. And hopefully you guys caught our episode last week. We did Brandee and myself partnered up with two of our other besties, and we did our episode on International Women's Day. And I mentioned that Brandee was going to be joining us today to talk about being turned on by ourselves and really diving into the Venus retrograde, which is happening right now up until April 12th. And Brandee also shared with me that we're also in the eclipse season of March between the 13th and the 29th. So perfect when this episode goes live, so that this would be very timely. But Brandee, I'd love for you to take a moment to reintroduce yourself, because I know that you have pivoted and shifted, and those of you that have been watching the video, you'll see that she is Luna B, which is her astrology name. And yeah, Brandee, just share a little bit how where your focus has shifted more recently, and really how you're helping women truly unleash the inner goddess in them, and which is a lot of, I think we're going to dive into that a lot in today's episode. So welcome, Brandee.
Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here. And a little bit about, I guess, how I shifted and where I'm shifting is I have been deep diving into astrology, completely fascinated by it and the influence that the planets have on us physically, emotionally, spiritually, as a guiding light in our lives. And I don't know about you, but we could always use an energy source that is greater than ourselves to guide us, right? So that we're not feeling, alone or confused. Maybe you're having a bad day, and we could understand it sometimes through astrology, and it could also set us up that this is a cycle. And I know that a lot of the work that you do is supporting women with planning for productivity so they're not burning out. So the same thing, we could apply that astrologically. And we learn that there are periods where we are invited to slow down. Mm-hmm. So I support women from an embodiment and an empowerment perspective to connect with the stars and connect to the stars within themselves.
Oh, I love it. Like, it's funny when you and I started talking more about this I had recently actually got the book right here. I kind of dove into this book called Do Less by Kate Northup, and, talking about for women, how we have this 28-day cycle because our productivity cycles are in line with our the moon phases and our internal cycle. And we will have an episode coming in the next couple of weeks as well, where I interviewed someone who dives in a little bit more specifically around that piece. But I think I remember chuckling with you, sharing with you, I remember as a teacher, and we'd always joke around in the staff room saying, oh, it's a full moon, because we noticed how sometimes our students would be a little bit more, I guess more, maybe more is a little bit how to explain it, right? And you just notice that they might be a little bit off, or they might be a little bit more agitated, or the behavior, right? Like they just had a lot more energy. And it was so fun really uncovering that a little bit more, because it was kind of just, that was just what was, that's what we said, but really understanding like actually what is really happening. And as you mentioned, like we're getting into connection with where the stars align and where the planets are, so we can tap into, if we are feeling a little bit off, it kind of, right. The thing is, high achievers are so, we're high achievers. We are very hard on ourselves. And sometimes we end up in this whole self beat up place of like, I'm not working harder. I'm not being productive enough. Oh, I can't focus. But I know, being such good friends with Brandee, she's helped me, myself, and all the women she works with understand and be curious around, okay, what is really going on, as you said, like even the energy that could be contributing it, so that we are not so hard on ourselves and we can be curious and tune into what's happening, which can actually increase our productivity.
100%. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So let's just start off with the first topic of the energy of full moon. So yes, when there is full moon, that energy of the moon is supercharged and affects us. So it affects us and it affects everyone. So in the hospitals, there's more doctors, there's more emergencies. In the police stations as well, there's more staff on board. Yes, in schools, the teachers always feel it because the energy is up, the ocean waves change. It affects us. So this cycle is a cycle we get to prepare for because it happens every month. And I wanted to go back that we're in eclipse season. So this will be aired next week after the first series of the eclipse. So the eclipse is a full moon on steroids. So the first eclipse is in Virgo, and it'll be March 13th, 14th. And then the following eclipse is March 29th in Aries, and that is closing out an 18-month cycle. So we could look, we already put that in our calendar. So we know that these are actually energy surges, so that they can shake us up. So when we put that in our calendar, okay, so we will plan less for that day. And so that's how we work with, let's say, the moon, as you said, which is a 29-day cycle, just like a woman's cycle. And we're actually here in celebration and in honor of Venus. So I want to share a little bit about Venus and introduce her. Is this a good time?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, great. So Venus is the goddess planet of love, beauty, balance, harmony. We all have a Venus. And some of the planets are closer to us than others. So the planets that are closer to us that affect us are Mercury, which a lot of people have heard of. Mercury is like the mind, and it goes into retrograde 3 times a year. So a lot of times we're like, oh no, Mercury is in retrograde when things are falling apart. So that happens 3 times a year. And there's Venus, and there's Mars. So we just had a Mars retrograde as well, which is less common. That happens about every 2 years. And the Venus retrograde happens every 18 months. And we are currently in it. So I want to share a little bit about what does that mean when a planet goes in retrograde, and what practices can we cultivate? So if Venus is the planet of pleasure, of love, of beauty, of relationship, and harmony, and it goes into retrograde, meaning that it's standing still. It's standing still. It's almost inviting us to take a pause, to reflect and revise our relationship to beauty, to love, to value, to our own ways that we value and honor ourselves as a woman or as a man, because men also have Venuses, right? So it's not only exclusive to women, but we're here today, I think, representing women on this podcast. And so we're invited right now to really reflect and to slow down. So this is a period, again, of slowing down to honor ourselves of, are we working towards our value right now? Are we really holding ourselves up in that mirror of like, am I in alignment with where I want to be going? Am I really holding my relationship to my body as a sacred one? And what is my relationship to just pleasure and rest? Because rest is part of the cycle as well. When a planet moves in retrograde, it's inviting us to really reflect, and revise. So this is a cycle right now that we are in a deeper, more nourishing relationship to the goddess of love and beauty.
I love that, even timing wise. We had the International Women's Day last week, and then we're speaking into this. And when you're saying Venus, I feel like it's so freeing, like it's very opening. I don't know. There's just something, maybe it's your red sweater, Brandee, or there's just something about this Venus, this power, this feeling of empowerment as a woman. And, the reality is we do find ourselves in a very masculine space, right? In the doing, which is basically opposite of what you're saying. And when we're looking in putting our time, attention, energy is really in that results piece, right? So being able to give yourself permission to slow down, go a little bit more internal, and create that space of beauty and self-love. And even like, I feel like the love and kind of connection with the people around you, like there's so much power in being able to pause in that space to create that. And if you're listening, it might sound a little bit like counterintuitive to the hustle, go, go, go mindset, which we know as women, we are often, right, subconsciously, we're up against, because the default is not necessarily to slow down, to go internal, and to focus on the beauty and the love. It's a lot about the doing and the production. So for those that are listening, that perhaps maybe this is the first time that they've heard of this, is there something that, like, how do you tune into the slowing down? How do you take what you're saying, like on a logical piece, and go internally to embody what you're sharing here today, Brandee?
Yeah. So marking on the calendar, let's just look at it as a period of, let's even look at this as a practice of a period of time. So from March 1st until April 12th, Venus is in retrograde. Okay. Let's look at our value system as women, and just starting with that piece. And we just did this as friends, like, who is a woman that you honor and respect and admire, and what are her values? And are you holding her as someone who is a value, and are you holding yourself in line with your own values? So it could be a reassessment of values. That's one way. Another way is like feeling within yourself, in your body, am I rested? Am I rested and able to receive? Because if we are always in the projection forward and always in momentum and always in giving, and where could I give next, we are not creating the container to receive. And a feminine principle is the principle of receptivity, of softening, of that we're able to hold the container to be filled up, and we're not constantly pushing that container outwards into the world. So is there a space within your vessel to receive more? And the vessel is the body. The vessel of the female body is the womb. It is the container of also pleasure. What is one's relationship to pleasure? And are you allowing space during this Venus retrograde? Can you allow space to revisit simple, easy, flowing practices that are nourishing for your Venus?
What's coming to mind, of course, the brain always goes, well, what does that look like when you say that? What are some practical tips, right? So yeah. I'd love to hear some practical tips and to share with us what that looks like for you, Brandee, because you are one. I mean, you practice what you preach. So I'm curious, even for yourself, like, what does that look like, whether it's a daily practice or a weekly practice, to tie that into allowing and the receiving and being open to that feminine energy and the Venus that we, in my experience, a lot of women, right? It's not the default, and to break through. So that does become more of a natural default for us.
Love it. So the first thing that I actually started to do a couple of weeks ago was also, and even more that, and you know this, Alex, is just like redefining how I see myself and show up in a way that is aesthetic for my own eye, in my brand. Like, who am I, and how do I get to show up, and how do I get to to feel in my own body that feels beautiful to me? And what is my relationship to beauty? Like for me, in my senses, what is pleasurable? Like for me, I love nature. So just if we wake up the senses, because the senses are a way into the body. So sensually with your eyes, what is aesthetic to you? Touch with your body, whether it's your own self touching oneself with cream or a bubble bath, or you go for a massage during this period. So you're nourishing your senses. Even the way you eat your food, right? Are you doing it in a way that is pleasurable? Are you eating food that is awakening pleasure, the pleasure principle in your body? What you're listening to also, like, to me, my Venus practice is unplugging. Like my Venus practice is I go in nature and I just listen to the birds and I'm immerse myself fully in the experience, nothing in my ears, just tuning into all sounds, all of my senses awake. So that is one practice. And another practice is that I journal. Like the next day, I journal every day 3 to 5 things that I've done in a Venusian way. How did I nourish my Venus? So, what were practices that have really tapped into my senses, or that I allowed rest or receptivity in my life, that I wasn't in this charging forward, but that I was just creating space to receive.
I love that you talked about that. That's something actually I started very recently. It's actually through a conversation with ChatGPT, but I was noticing that too. And it came from another discussion with somebody else about tapping into the femininity, and to receive is feminine. And it's not necessarily, again, a natural default for a lot of women, especially a lot of high achievers. And so, yeah, that was sort of ChatGPT's prompt to me was, it's great to look at the gratitude and to look at, to obviously go through your day and things that we've talked about in this podcast before. But the invitation was to really look at, where are you receiving? And not necessarily like financially, but really, for example, I'll put in like, I received a hug from my daughter, right? And I love that because I'm seeing the relationship between receiving, well, with also like touch in the 5 senses. But it's been a lovely, I will say it's been a beautiful way for me to wrap up my day, to pause and really reflect on the day and to shift the focus on, how did I receive today? Whether it is a compliment or a feedback or a message or just that time or the gift, or like, it's been a great stretch, I will say, to also not be so focused on doing things of receptivity, but also the senses. And I didn't really realize I was doing that until you mentioned that. I'm like, okay. So I noticed that my brain automatically went to also looking for receiving in senses. And maybe that's also because we're in Venus, and because that only happened this past week. So I love that you brought that up, and it's like that beautiful reflection. So to practice and stretch ourselves and building that into our day of, where are we receiving, so we can embody more of that femininity.
I love that. And the feminine organ are the breasts and the womb. And if we're really reflecting again on Venus, Venus is the goddess of love, and she's the goddess of sexuality. And so also to be in relationship with this part of your body, which is the organs. Let's look at the womb. It is the organ of pleasure. And to create space and to clear out, if this is a beautiful time to clear out your stories of shame in the body. And as women, we hold a lot of shame. Men do as well, but we're here representing women, as we're both women. What is your womb story? What is your story in relationship to this beautiful organ? That first time you had your cycle and experienced your cycle, the birth of your children, the beautiful sexual encounters you got to experience. So it is also a beautiful practice to be in relationship to your own story of your womb, and also to clear out if you're holding on to stories that are no longer serving you, especially that maybe were inherited from your family, from your mother line.
So I assume you do journaling around that. I'm just curious if there's any particular prompts, or I'm always thinking of those that maybe this is very new to them. And when you say that, like it's like, okay, this is great, but where do I go from, like, where do I go
Yeah.
for that to tap into that? And like, I'm thinking for maybe women, like I would say as a mom and having given birth, I'm more in connection with that. But prior to giving birth, prior to have children, I don't think I had that same kind of connection. The menstrual cycle was more of an annoyance. Like I didn't see it in the same way until obviously much older and learning more about that. And because of the relationship with the moons. But for those that, again, it may be, it's not a natural or a thing to think about, where do you even go to start there and to be curious about that?
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, we all come from a womb. So
Mm,
we can begin there. We come from a womb. So the first place to go is to understand maybe the way that your mother held her body, because that's our first understanding, right? It's
mm,
like, how did our mother, what imprints did we have from our mother teaching us about being in a woman's body? And
mm,
we come from that line, and it always amazes me, but like our grandmothers, we were originally carried in their womb. I don't know if you know that genealogy, but
I think I've heard that
you're
before. Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
just to understand it, like your mother grew in your mother grew in her mother's womb. But when your mother was growing, she had all of her potential eggs, which was you, Alex. So at one point, you were actually inside your grandmother as a potential egg. So that's why I'm like the genetic imprint of the womb is real. And so
Hmm.
to understand, how did your mother's mothering a feminine journey impact you as a woman is a great way to begin this journey. What was your relationship? Another question with your cycles when you were younger. Like, were they easy? Were they difficult? Where are you now in that process? Like, are you still cycling regularly? Are you pregnant? Or are you perimenopausal? Are you menopausal? Like, this is where are you in your journey in your feminine cycles? And then sexual experiences, like what imprint did they leave and what stories are you carrying
Mm,
in your womb, and is there anything that gets to be cleared out so that Venus is being reborn right now. This is
mm,
what's happening in a retrograde. She is being reborn. She's reborn every 8 years at this exact place in our chart. So if we look back at a pattern in 2017, where were we? Because we're back there right now. And to understand what was our Venus journey over the past 8 years as she's being reborn right now from an evening star to a morning star. And it's a rebirth. So it's our opportunity for a rebirth.
that's exciting when you think about that. And also it puts I guess, importance of the timing, because now that it's happening and then won't happen again for another 8 years. Now I know, Brandee, you have different practices and things like that. And I'm really curious when we talk about like letting go of those stories, um, you know, writing them down, but there's anything else with, I know sometimes when you have candles or incense or anything like that to make it like a bit of a practice and sort of a ritual to really signify, okay, I'm really shedding and I'm saying goodbye to this. And I really want to step into this next, like I was going to say Venus time,
Rebirth. Venus
rebirth, step into
rebirth.
this
Yeah.
rebirth, really letting go and releasing, not, of course we talk on the neuroscience, like letting go the subconscious and those stories that don't serve us, but then even the feeling and the senses of going through that practice and tapping into that can also really support with letting that go.
Beautiful. Yeah, of course. So the first thing, of course, let's put it down on paper. Like, let's journal and let's give us time, like without pressure. Maybe you're going to take like this next 2 weeks to write out your pelvic story, to write out your pelvic journey. And then, when a part of it you want to really release, it's like, to me, it's just hands on your womb. It's hands on your
Mm,
pelvis. It's breathing into the sacred container and just even maybe you could one day do a massage, a gentle massage, but even if it was a daily practice before you get out of bed or when you go to sleep, either one, of course, put on your hands on your belly and breathing into your belly and just say, oh my God, this is such a sacred center. This is my sacred center. Just, I love you. Oh, it feels good. What is awakening inside of me today? Because when we tap into this source energy, it is our magnetic energy of attraction. It is our most power. We create babies in there, girl. Like, what else could we create when we tap into that source energy and it's clear and it's not holding on to stuff that is holding us back? It's clear, it's rebirthed, and we're connected to it. It's your power center. It's your most powerful center. And it's our most pleasurable center of ourselves as well.
I feel the passion and the energy behind that. And like, really, I mean, I always remember when I was pregnant with Amelia, you always reminded me, and it was like, that became the practice of every day, just connecting with her. Right. I mean, even that moment of 9 months, it's 9 months. And then there's going through those different phases of, getting preparing for pregnancy, then afterwards. And this, even with the whole body too, like with the female and going through that, I mean, our hormones and everything we're experiencing. I mean, you're shedding light on like premenopause and menopause and all of those things. So as a woman, like if we're feeling a lot of energy, maybe a lot of angst energy, I'm curious if that is tying into this, like for women that do find themselves to be a little bit more anxious, to tap into what is going on as well, that might support an understanding. Okay, this is why I might be feeling a little bit more anxious right now in the body.
So I wouldn't put Venus as a planet that's in charge of anxiety. So I'm not going to put those two together because Mercury is a planet that rules the nervous system. So, but Venus rules the hormones, the hormones. And what's beautiful about Venus is that her cycle is she's 9 months, a morning star, 9 months, an evening star. So when you just said, like, you were pregnant for 9 months. So here we go. This is so feminine, right? It is so feminine. And it's an invitation of connection. So where are we? We're always inviting ourselves to connect to ourselves. That the intelligence isn't outside of ourselves. It's about going within. So the direction of the senses or the invitation within ourselves. It's not anyone else's senses. They're your senses. What turns you on, what lights you up, what is pleasing to you. It's for you to know, for you to discover, for you to honor your journey and to honor your Venus. It's like, astrology, we look at what sign is your Venus in? What element is your Venus in? What house is your Venus is? Like in an astrology reading, like I dive deep into your own personal Venus. But for all of us collectively, we are in the retrograde at the moment.
Well, and I was going to mention about your readings, right? So if you are listening to this episode and you're really curious to know where your Venus is on your chart, Brandee does do her readings where she gives you, your personalized reading so you can uncover and even go deeper with not just Venus, but the other planets as well and understand a lot more. I mean, I can't even begin to dive into, because it's complex in a way, but that's what Brandee's gift is to be able to help you, like, explain it to you to really understand, to really maximize in your chart to support you in where you are. I do want to go back to one thing you said there, and this might be again more a chart thing, but you talked about the Venus in the morning star and the evening star. Can you explain that a little bit more in terms of just understanding what you mean by that?
Yeah, I would love to. So Venus right now is an evening star. It's been there for 18 months. So it's ahead of the sun. And it's very visible. It's always close to the sun. It's a personal planet, like I said. So it's always close to the sun. The Venus cycle is 584 days. So as we know, the Earth to go around the sun is 365 days. So their cycles are a little bit different. So just understand the cycle. And the morning star is that it rises before the sun. So we will see Venus in the morning, starting March. The exact dates that Venus starts to become a morning star is April, actually, until September 2026. It will be a morning star. And then it transitions 9 months later, it goes into the evening star. So it's the relationship to the sun.
And how does that impact then? Is there an impact on depending on if it's a morning star, it just happens to be where it's located?
It's just a relationship to where you'll see it in the sky.
Okay.
And we're looking at the period where it's making its transition and its rebirth, which is the retrograde, which is what we're talking about, which really is our invitation to reassess our relationship to beauty, value, love, feminine receptivity, embodiment of our womb, embodiment of our sensuality and sexuality. So this is the period we're in right now.
I love that invitation to just like take each of those topics, and really dive into and look at what does each one mean to you and what would you like to call in as we go into this rebirth season. And you said something a little earlier too about like going inner. And the reality is we do live in a very busy and noisy world, and we have information available to us like that. However, I will say, and I mean, it's thanks to you being in my life, and just when I know, and I've noticed this with clients, with multiple high achievers, like when you go quiet, the answer is in you. But it does require to give yourself permission to go quiet, turn off the notifications. I love how you said, Brandee, like going into nature. I mean, there's something about the green energy, right? When it helps with productivity and clarity and creativity. But the reality is like everything really is in you. It might feel like it's outside of you, but it really is in you. It's just the invitation to get quiet and to slow down enough to be able to connect with your intuition, your own knowledge, because it is in you. It's not another book. It's not another podcast. It's not anything else that you need to do. It's that pure connection with yourself and tapping into that femininity, which I always think, which is such a beautiful gift. And I think what you're bringing here today, Brandee, is such a beautiful gift for the listener to realize, like, it's not another thing that you have to do. It's like, it's a beautiful opportunity to give yourself that gift of slowing down, creating that space for yourself, and journaling on this rebirth of what you would like to experience over the next 8 years with this opportunity.
Yeah, yes, definitely. It's any invitation, that we are given from the planets, from the solar system, of a slowdown, that is so supportive in astrology. So that's really what we're focusing on here today. And we know that when we are rested and connected to ourselves, our level of really bringing to life our vision and what we want to be achieving has that much space without that, right? Without that disconnection to self, because it is your gifts that you are bringing. So this is an invitation to go back within and touch who you are in your very, very essence, and your value and your beauty and your love and love of self. And then you get to spread that, because boy, the world needs more love, more connection, more value, more beauty, more aestheticism, more equality. All of these things are Venusian things, even decoration and the way that we decorate ourselves and decorate our environments. This is Venus.
There's another word that you said that I kind of want to loop back to. You said touch, right? Like that touch, like with yourself and with others around you. Are there any additional like practices that you incorporate with touch? I always remember also the 20-second hug that you introduced me to a while ago. And I always love that invitation. So I'm just curious if there's anything like that where we can stretch and invite the listener to slowly embark and embed more of this touch with oneself and also with those around us to create that connection. Because my experience is with, let's go back to the hug, for example. we're just hugging other people, but it's not really a hug. It's almost like an act, and it's more of a doing thing versus really tapping into the feeling and the beingness of that intimacy, of that closeness with our loved ones, but also with ourselves.
Yeah, beautiful. So it's interesting because I work with a lot of women, and for a lot of women, touch is the most challenging of the senses, or it's just like, oh, what touch? What do you mean? And so for me as well, I for a long time, from going back many years, like I didn't want to be touched, like stay away from me, like I cringe. So one, to first the baseline, like what is your relationship right now to touch without any pressure or judgment? And um what touch do you like? Like, let's be curious even about touch. Some people like hard touch, some people like soft touch. Like, what is pleasing it for you in that region of touch, right? We all know some touches are really annoying and some touches feel fantastic. It's like somebody asks you for a massage, what type of pressure do you want? So understanding what feels good to you. And it's a muscle that for some people that they get to build because they don't have that experience of safe touch. Maybe at one point they were violated, so it is not safe. So rebuilding a relationship to safety with trust. And for me, I'm in a partnership. So what is my, like, probably one of my favorite parts of my day is like I sleep and I cuddle my partner all night long, right? So knowing that a lot of times if I can't go back to sleep, I'll just caress him because it'll be comforting to me. Like giving touch is really comforting to me, and also receiving touch is comfortable to me. But I'm at that point, but not everyone's yet there. Touch, right? So touch could be also if you have a pet, right? Like touching and your pet, and even with your young daughters, like you could experience with them, like just what feels good, like the way you could have an experience. You could play with touch, and they're two different girls, two different experiences. So there's so many ways, and it's intentional. It's curiosity, it's receptivity, and it's giving and receiving.
I love that reminder of the giving and receiving piece because it reiterates it's not just about the giving, you also get to receive. So, Brandee, I know we're about to wrap up here. I'd love to know where the listener could find you because I know that you have some different places, and especially if you want to learn more about this, especially and at this time right now, because I know that you are sharing, information. I don't know if it's daily, but you are really sharing a lot to really help women tap into and let's say take advantage of this time of the year or this relationship with Venus at this time of year. But I know that you have such a passion for this. And so I would love to share the best place for the listener to connect with you or join a community so that they can definitely learn more from you and really, maximize and tap into what Venus is bringing to us right now.
Yes, definitely. So one, I have a YouTube channel people could check out once a week. I do a live. I have a newsletter people could sign up for. And if you're curious and you want to learn more, I would say let's start with an astrology reading. I could definitely drop a link and give it to you so that people really get to understand what is their makeup, and I could support them right from the beginning on one reading, which is so supportive and eye-opening. And yeah, I definitely have community of women that I work with. So the best thing, get on my newsletter if you want a little chat. I also have a free discovery call. So I'm everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, you can find me.
Right. We'll have all those links in the show notes. So we'll make sure that you have that available. As we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to invite the listener to lean into to really maximize this relationship that we get to really develop with Venus at this time of year?
Yes. So we gave you many, many practices over this interview. Thank you, Alex, for pulling them out and inviting our listeners to tune into themselves. And I would just really commit to one of those practices, like not to overwhelm yourself with all of them, but like what resonated from these practices and commit to it on a daily basis till April 12th in a way that is nourishing your Venus, that is nourishing your goddess of love and beauty and value, and that it is it's a reassessment, a reevaluation, a relearning of the rebirth of your Venus. So to really, really be gentle with yourself.
I love that. Thank you so much, Brandee. And thank you, listener, for tuning in to another episode of Leech Unstoppable Podcast. Look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Unleashed Unstoppable Podcast with your hosts, Alexandra Carter and Carol Register.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review and subscribe.
That's all for this episode, Wildly Ambitious Leaders. See you next week.